Hi, everyone. Welcome to the replay. We are glad you are here. And today, ladies, we are talking about advanced listening. We did a three-part segment on listening back in December because listening is so important. It required 3 sessions, 3 hours to discuss everything that's involved with it. And I've got a whole lot of new stuff that really takes us to advanced listening. And that is what we are going to discuss today. Now, the reason that listening is so important is that, first of all, if you don't listen properly, you can't speak properly. If Dee Dee is talking to me and I'm only half listening and she's sharing important information, well, my response to her is not going to be complete because I wasn't intently listening to what she had to say. So listening is far more than just hearing what you have. It's interpreting. Now, you've heard me say this before, but there are 3 parts to listening. Does anybody remember what they are? I'll give you a hint. The first one is hearing. Okay, I'll tell you. It's hearing, seeing, and feeling. Now, research shows that only 7% of conversation has to do with the words. That's just enough to give you the information you need. Another more than 50% has to do with, well, actually, the rest, the other 93%, has to do with body language and tone of voice. So, seeing, am I stressed? Am I sitting up straight? Am I very rigid in the conversation that I'm having? Am I fidgeting? Am I looking off into the distance when I talk? Which could mean that I'm thinking hard about something. Am I distracted by something that's happening in the environment behind you? So seeing is really important. But the third one is feeling. And feeling has to do with, does this pass the BS test? Are you, if I'm telling you that somebody passed away and I'm giggling about it, something's just not right. I've either gone off the deep end or I really didn't like that person. But if I'm talking about something sincere, this is particularly true with personal relationships. If you're having a serious conversation and the other person wants to go off in this other direction and they want to talk about, well, yeah, but we could go out on Saturday night and we could do this and this and this. And if it's a serious conversation, that's not the right answer. So it's what you hear, it's what you see, and it's how you feel about the situation. Do the emotions match the words? Now, there's a kind of listener called a pseudo listener. And unfortunately, a whole lot of people, and sometimes including me, and I'm working really hard on it. Pseudo listening is when I'm listening to you, but meanwhile, I'm rehearsing what I'm going to say back. So if I'm rehearsing what I'm going to say back to you, or I'm thinking about how I'm going to fix your problem, what I'm going to say, well, it's all about what I, instead of listening to you. So that's what a pseudo listener does. Yes, Miss Victoria Lynn.
Thank you. You bring up a really good point with this, and I want to spend a little time on it because part of the things most people do when they're talking, especially if you're put in a position of a leadership or authority, or you're the one, when you start listening and they're explaining whatever it is. Sometimes it could be confused, sometimes it could be convoluted. Maybe they don't even know how to ask the question, but they're trying to find out something. And when you're listening, if you realize that they're confused, or you realize they're having a hard time asking the question. What this is where I start in my back of my head the conversation. What are they trying to say? What do
Mhm.
they mean? What are they trying to say? And I know that you've had those things, but I'm like, when that happens and you're listening in those steps, how is it that you can involve yourself without it sounding like you're walking on them or interrupting them, or not trying to hurry the conversation, which is part of what I do. Is it this? Is it that? Is it the other? And sometimes it doesn't go over smooth. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's difficult because obviously when someone's talking to you, you're processing what they're saying, or maybe you're not because you
Trying to.
can't.
Mhm.
Um, and meanwhile, your brain is going. Um, and when your brain is going, you can't really pay attention to them fully. So you need to stop them if you don't understand it and say, "I am so sorry. I'm not understanding this. Could you say that a different way and see if I can get it this time?" Because if you're we call it the noise.
Mhm.
We all have noise. There's internal noise, external noise, and semantic noise. Semantic noise is sort of one of what you're talking about, where it's what you're saying is confusing me, and it's either because you're not being clear, you're using jargon or
Mm.
words that I don't understand. Um, so those types of things, or it could also be an accent. That's another way that this would that
Yes.
semantics
Yes.
semantic noise would come in. It makes it very difficult to listen, and you just need to stop them. And
Yeah. Sometimes what I do is, when I listen and I go, I'm sorry, can I ask you a few questions? Because if I ask the question, we might get to clarity. And I don't, this is the hard part of how I speak. I don't want to walk on them. I don't want them to waste my time. But mostly, I just want to understand how they're feeling, what they want, what they're asking for. And sometimes, if you talk about a topic, they don't know what question to ask. Or if there's confusion, because a lot of people, when they speak colloquially, have a tendency to use they for everything. They did this and they did that and they said that and they did this. And you don't know if they're talking about two or three different theys, who the theys were in the sentence, they, which they.
Mhm.
And so that clarity piece, um, is it's such an important way. I want to be respectful. My goal is to be respectful and to be helpful and to be clear, because sometimes you think you understand the question, then you answer something else and somebody bumps you and goes, I don't think that's what they were asking, which is the most embarrassing thing for me. Like, I've been on stage, I don't think that's what they're asking. And you have to kind of have some clarity pieces.
Exactly, exactly. No, you're absolutely right, and that is a time where it's appropriate to interrupt. And, as opposed to stepping on them, I would normally say, put my hand up, see if they stop,
Like this is,
and
yeah.
and if they don't, say, I'm sorry, could you please clarify whatever, or ask a question? I just need to confirm. When you say they, do you mean Nisha and Didi?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so something like that is more than appropriate,
Thank you.
because that semantic noise
Hmm.
is really difficult. And whether it's an accent or jargon, I met with a client last night and she gets very defensive. And I said, "Well, why what makes you defensive in a conversation?" And she said she feels judged because she is an ESL speaker. And she says, "There's
Mm.
a lot of marketing jargon in my job. There's corporate jargon in my company, and they use a lot of phrases like beat around the bush, and I don't know what that means."
Interesting.
So that's where I told her, I said, I know it's hard. I know you have to be really brave, but you have to say, I'm sorry, could you just clarify that for me?
What does
And
it
even,
mean?
yeah, even if you do it now, if there are 14 things in the meeting, 14 pieces of jargon, you don't want to say it 14 times. But if you just make a point of saying one time in a meeting, I'm sorry, I haven't heard that phrase before. Or could you refresh my memory?
Yeah.
Uh, but that really affects your ability to listen if you have language issues that are affecting clarity. And that, go ahead.
Well, I was thinking I always use the, "What do you mean when you say?" Because what I wanna do is understand what their meaning is. What do you mean when you say this word? Because sometimes, like Edie pointed out a long time ago, probably 30 years ago, she was like, "You have to understand the meaning," because she said, even the word jam, and she's like, "Jam is a product, jam is an attitude, and this is my jam." And you don't know which jam they're using, and you're like, "What do you mean when you say jam?" And
Mhm,
I was like, "Is it a traffic jam, which is different than a jar of jam?" And
mhm.
I that's why I always ask that, because I don't wanna assume anything. I wanna be clear, and there, as a leader, as a teacher, there's a lot of assumption. We are all assuming that our students are with us, that they know what we're saying, blah, 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 when we could be out in left field.
Well, exactly. Yes, Dee Dee.
I'd like to clarify whether you're talking on the role of the speaker or whether you're talking on the role of the listener, because you keep jumping between the two and it is a bit confusing.
Well, we're talking about being a listener. Now, there are times you need to speak as a listener when you say, excuse me, I don't understand. But it's all about what's making you listen or not listen clearly or not listen clearly. And the semantic noise that I was talking about, that's from the listener's perspective. If you're saying something I don't understand, if there's a language or there's jargon or colloquialisms or different things like that that make it difficult to understand. So that's called semantic noise. There's also external noise. And external noise is your phone. You're holding your phone, you carry it everywhere you go, and it vibrates in your hand. And and you want with everything in you to look down subtly like nobody will notice. And and even if you don't look down, you're thinking, "Boy, I wonder if that was Ada. I hope she's okay." Well, she would have called Steve if she wasn't. But maybe she needs me to stop and pick something up. And meanwhile, Nisha's talking to me, and my brain is over here because I had external stimulation. Or it could be that somebody's having an argument in the other side of the room that's distracting me. Um, Things like that. Those are external, that's external noise that can impact your ability to listen. And
I'm
then the
so guilty of that.
I know, a squirrel. um, the other one is internal noise. And internal noise is, first of all, every time you come to a conversation, whatever Vicky is saying is going through whatever filter you have. And that filter could be about the subject, it could be about the environment, it could be about the way she speaks, or it could be internal noise like, I'm really stressed today. I didn't sleep well last night. Um, I am over the moon happy about something that just occurred. And so I may not be giving you my full attention because internally I've got noise going on in my head. Um, Another piece of internal noise is ego. Have you ever talked to somebody who thinks they're better than you? You know, particularly someone in a leadership position or certain teachers, and they listen with half an ear because
Yeah, they're better than
they're
you.
so much better than you are.
They call
So,
that mansplaining.
yeah. So but they don't really care what you're saying, so they're only giving you half their attention. And
Mhm.
it's because of their ego, which is internal. And the last form of internal noise is an agenda. If I have an agenda when I'm talking to Dee Dee and I want Dee Dee to make a cake for me. So when I'm talking to her, I'm asking her about the dog and we're talking about the weather and she's responding to all of those things sincerely. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, okay, how many niceties do I have to have before I get to ask for my cake? So, so they have an agenda and they're not really listening 100% because they're waiting for the opportunity to get to their part. So that's internal, external, and semantic noise that affects your listening. Now,
Semantic noise is when you have an agenda
no,
and you're
semantic noise is when you're having problems understanding them. They're using jargon, they have an accent, um, that type of thing. But no, the agenda is part of internal noise.
okay, go ahead.
So you've got those three types of noise that also impact how you listen. Now, there are 5 types of listeners, and one of them, and I don't think I've encountered one of these in a long time. It's the pretend listener. Now, you get this a lot when you're in meetings because I have to come to this meeting, so I'm here and I'm staring at the speaker, and then this person talks, so I stare there and I stare here. And what I'm really doing is putting my grocery list in my head. So they're pretend listening. Um, Usually in meetings is when you'll see that more so than a one-on-one conversation. The second, hello, my friend, welcome. We are just talking about advanced listening today, and you got on just in time to hear the 5 levels of listening. And we talked about pretending, people who are mostly in meetings, how they are looking at one person while they speak and looking at another person, but they're only pretending to listen. They're really doing their grocery list in their head. Yes, Vicki.
So these things are really important. A lot of times when that person is doing these behaviors, where they're whatever they are, as the speaker, you have a tendency to notice when they're spaced out about something else or thinking about something else or whatever. And if I get to that point, I don't like it. If somebody's not giving me their full attention, or if I'm secondary, I'm leaving the conversation. That's it. So the way I back out of the conversation most of the time is I say, "Do you have the bandwidth for this conversation?"
Mhm,
And usually they come out and they're like, "Oh, yes, 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 I do." And I
mhm,
said, "Oh, good, because it looked like you were preoccupied with something else."
mhm.
And part of me thinks that's really rude, but part of me thinks what they're doing is rude. I'm not sure if it's rude or not, and I'm not sure my aggression, because that's a pretty aggressive sentence to say. Do you have the bandwidth for this conversation? And they're always, yes, yes, yes. Oh, good, because it looked like you were preoccupied by something. And then I say, if you need to, we could have this conversation later. But I don't want to be rude, but I don't want to be sucked into those. I think those are rude behaviors when people do that. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's okay to respectfully call them on it. If they're really not paying attention to you, they're wasting your time. And time is a valuable resource. So it's okay to say, um, the way that I would probably handle it is to say something like, "Does that make sense?" And at that point, you're going to jar them back into to where you were because you asked them a question and, oh my gosh, what was she talking about? So that will jar them into place. If it doesn't, and they say, yeah, I'm with you. You say, oh, okay, well, that's good. That's good. I was just concerned because you seemed a little preoccupied, and I wanted to make sure that you're getting this because it's really important. Um, Miss Nisha. Nope, you're still
Is it
muted.
on?
There you are. Now I can hear you.
So you answered it because I was going to ask if you ask them if it makes sense and they say, oh, yeah, and you go back to talking, how would you know if they're still listening or they just said it to kind of protect themselves from being exposed?
Exactly. Yeah, at that point, though, I would call them on it. You just seemed a little distracted, and this is really important. I wanted to make sure you got it. So definitely have a follow-up.
Okay.
The bandwidth is definitely uh, a very clear way to have the conversation, but it is a little aggressive. Um, so I would pursue something that's a little more subtle, but it jars them into shape and gets them to where they need to be. So the pretend that's the pretend listener. Now you also have the ignorer, and they're not even trying to let you know that they're listening. Again, this is often in a meeting situation. Um, Sometimes it could also be if you're in a group conversation, you're at a party somewhere, and they're just not doing their thing. They could be, have you ever been in a meeting and while we're talking about serious business, somebody's on their phone doing this, and you just want to say, "Hello, excuse me, pardon me, are we bothering you? Because if we are, you're welcome to leave." Um, So that's the ignorer. And normally their response will be, oh, no, that's okay. No, it's not okay. But they're ignoring you. So, yes, Vicky.
I'm wondering with that thing, because I hate the phone thing, but I'm wondering a little bit if that's generational, because sometimes younger people see it as okay to be at a table and scrolling on their phone. And I don't know if it's generational or not. And sometimes I feel like if they start scrolling on the phone, they've lost interest in you and the conversation. And to them, they're just, no, man, give me a minute. I'm just checking on things. And
Mhm.
I'm not sure which that is. And I feel like it's kind of an old fogey thought. But if you're out with your homies and you're having fun, you're probably not on your phone. So I'm trying to figure out, do you think it's generational and that they have a different set of norms than we do? Or is it just rude no matter what age group it is?
Well, it's rude no matter what age group it is, but I do think there's a generational side of it. Ada is 17, and Ada cannot do her homework unless she has music in her ear. And then, or she's listening to her class. She's cyber schooled, so she's listening to her class, sitting at a desk. I don't realize she's in class, and I'll come in and we're having a conversation. And I'll say, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry. Are you in school?" She says, "Yeah, that's okay. I can hear both of you." And the truth is, she can hear, not listen. She can hear both of us. She can do both things. But that doesn't mean that she's listening to both of us. So I still think it's appropriate to call someone on it, even if they're a young person. And you may not have an older person getting on their phone in a meeting and ignoring you, but you may notice that they're writing and you see they're writing a grocery list. It has nothing to do with the meeting at all. Now, where we start getting into, and again, this can be a meeting, but now we're starting to get into personal conversations, and that is the selective listener. And particularly in relationships, you get a lot of selective listening. I've had a long day. you've been home all day and you want to talk about, well, here's what I did, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then there was this, and I'm nodding. Yeah, okay. Oh, good. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. But then they'll talk about dinner. Now, ping, I'm listening. And then they start talking about something else again, and I'm half listening. So the selective listener will decide what is important to them as opposed to what you think is important. The next type of listener is the attentive listener. And the attentive listener is a good listener. They're a listener that makes every attempt to listen to what you're saying, to really hear the words, to take in your whole body language, to feel the emotion that you're going. And they are paying attention so that when they respond, they're responding appropriately to what you're saying. So you will get that. That is an attentive listener. But then there is the elite listener. Now, the elite listener, they take it to a whole new level. This is a person, particularly a really good leader. They're not just listening to the words that you say and watching your body language and getting sense if there's congruency in your words and your actions. But they're paying attention to your intention. What is the intention of this conversation? Are you working your way up to ask a favor? Are you working your way up to do something? Are you just not a good communicator? Do I need to bring you back because you're rambling? But you can't do that unless you know the intention of the conversation. Sometimes they just want to blather, and sometimes you just need to let them do that. An elite listener will also, yes, Vicki?
I just wanted to say that's how Oprah Winfrey starts all of her business conversations in her office, everything. It's what is the intention of this conversation? That's the first thing she asks. I just wanted to add that.
I didn't know that. That's very good. And it's important because we've talked about this before, where when you're speaking, you want to lead with a point first. Time is precious, and you want to be listening and knowing that you're getting through and you're not wasting somebody else's time. I really don't like when my time is wasted. But I want to be respectful. So an elite listener just takes that extra step and listens for intention. They also listen for emotion. If this is a leader and somebody's talking to you and you can hear that they're just about to cry, they're talking about a project they're working on and things aren't going right. Well, if you are emotional enough, then this is a big deal. And I need to assess as an elite listener, is the emotion justified? Is it that bad? And I talk to you differently if it's that bad. Or I discount that. The other thing they listen for are gaps in what you share. Because somebody has said that, what's the phrase? The truth is in what's missing or what's left out. So if I'm telling you, so today at 8:00, I had a doctor's appointment. And then at 9, I stopped over at Sam's and picked up groceries. And then from 10 to 11, I was with my mom. From 11 to 2, I was with my girlfriends. And we had a great time when we had lunch. And then at 4:00, I came home. Well, you shared great detail up until 2:00. And then suddenly you jumped ahead to 4. So now I'm curious what happened between 2 and 4 that you didn't feel the need to share. So an elite listener will hear that. They'll hear what's missing in a conversation. Where you'll get that from me in my early days, and Vic, I'll get you in one second. Where you would get that from me is when somebody else made a mistake, and I wouldn't say Joe made the mistake. I would say, I would be very clear in, well, someone, and it appears that, and yada, yada, yada. A good listener would notice that I'm avoiding that topic and would probably come out and ask me, do you know who made the mistake? So they listen for the gaps in the conversation. Vicki, you had something to add.
I had a question I wanted to ask because you said something that's one of the most triggering things for me in a relationship with people is, especially if we're trying to develop a relationship, whether it's business, whether it's this, there are some people who love to listen and they listen all the time. But what they're listening for is all the information about you. They want to know you. They want you to be transparent. They want you to be vulnerable. They want you to constantly give, give, give. And they're very hidden in the conversation and they're uber polite. They'll say, I have an appointment at this, and they can be very close to you. They won't say, I'm going to the salon to get my hair done. They'll be like, I have an appointment at 2, 3, 4, whatever. And if you ask them what it is that I want to ask Ben if he had something he wanted to add because his mic is on, and I'm afraid that I'm talking over him, and that, if he wanted to share something.
If you want to share, just jump in. But Vic, continue with what you're saying until then.
Thank you. So what my red flags are, if people are hidden, if they can't show up in the conversation, I mistrust them right away. Right away. It's like the number one thing is that between friends, conversations are easy. So when, like, for instance, if I talk to you and I say, Karen, I've had a bad day, and you said, what happened? And I said, well, I had this really horrible conversation with someone, and it turned into an argument. And it seems like I'm sharing when really I would say, Robin and I had a fight. And in between friends, I'm close enough to you to say, Robin and I had a fight. We rarely fight. It doesn't happen. But if it did happen, you would expect me to say, Robin and I had a fight, and not, I had this argument where this happened. And what I feel like is, it's like pulling teeth to get somebody to show up and say what's actually happening. And to me, I feel like that isn't poor communication skills. That is a trigger for me to go, something ain't right here. They can't be open or whatever with me. And I want to know what you think, because sometimes people are so private and they want connection and they want you to constantly get them. Like you have to ask questions of somebody who does that. Well, what is it? Is it? It's so disassociated from talking or listening that if I have to overwork in the conversation, you're out. I'm not interested. If I'm overworking to get you to be present with me, do you know what I mean? Do you understand those dynamics?
Absolutely. Steve used to tease me that I used to be like that, not for nefarious purposes, but I was raised to be very private. There were lots of secrets in our house. And so people will say afterwards, I met Karen, she was so nice. And they think I'm so nice because I ask them questions about themselves. I would open a statement and then they would talk about themselves. And people love to talk about themselves. And the truth is they knew nothing about me. And, but that was that's how I was raised. So that was okay. But that wasn't for nefarious purposes. There are people out there who they just want to know, oh, and what is your 2 o'clock appointment? Oh, you're meeting them. Okay. Uh, but yeah, if somebody is intentionally holding back and you have a relationship that is more open than that, first of all, that's a flag that something's wrong. If they're like that all the time, you're probably not friends with them in the first place. You don't have that kind of relationship with them. But if they normally are very open, and this particular time, this goes back to the listening, to, you're hearing the words, you're hearing the voice, but something doesn't feel right. You're not there's a gap in what we're talking about. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think it's so important because part of the listening that women do, the first thing we want to know is, am I safe? Especially with a man, am I safe?
Yep.
And the intention of the conversation, it's like women have 3 levels of listening, and that the part of us that is saying, am I safe, is kind of sensating whether we're safe or not, and we're listening for danger words that are, not like that. It's a different type of listening.
Hmm. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Dee Dee, what do you have?
I just wanted to have her explain what she meant by the three women have 3 levels of listening. What are those?
Well, we have our ears.
And is there a difference between the way men are listening to a conversation and women?
I think so.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, I can speak to that because one of the things I wanted to talk about was listening between the generations and listening between the genders. Um, First of all, to your point, the genders, yes, men and women listen completely differently. Men want to get to the bottom of it. Someone who has more of a stronger masculine side wants to get to the bottom of the conversation and fix it. They want to move on. Now, that doesn't mean women are not like that. It just means they have more of a masculine side to them. I am very much a bottom line, how can I fix it kind of person. And I have to be careful to be a good listener and to not be an interrupter because I have that masculine tendency. Women, on the other hand, normally listen very well if their intentions are pure because they are relationship builders and connectors. So generally, conversations between women, that's why women can talk on the phone for hours or go for a cup of coffee and sit there for hours and talk. And you don't hear about a guy sitting on the phone for hours talking to his best friend or going for a drink and sitting there, for 4 or 5 hours. So there's definitely a difference in gender. Men are more to the point. Generationally, it's very different because younger people who've been raised with technology, they're used to communicating in short sentences and emojis and abbreviations. So they're not having the connection with people as much. Therefore, they need to learn to listen. It's not something that just happens. It's contrary to how they have raised themselves. So it's critical that parents are teaching their children to listen properly, not as in listen to me when I speak. I told you to clean your room, but to listen as a communicator, because listening is so important. And the younger generation, say age 30 and younger, it's getting worse as they get younger. They aren't used to having voice conversations. They communicate by text, they communicate by quick video feeds. You watch a kid's video, and he's normally not on doing a 20-minute TikTok. He's doing a 5 or less because he's not used to talking to people. And that's the other thing. The younger generation is accustomed to getting on social media, on Instagram and on TikTok, and doing their short videos. They're not talking to a person. So even though they're speaking, they're not conversing. And if you're not conversing, you don't have to listen. Does that make sense, Dee Dee? Thank you. Vicki?
You said something I wanted some more clarification about, and that is that you notice that younger generations speak by texting, and they're actually having a hard time using, communication skills for communicating via voice. And what I wanted to know is, do you think that there is a shift in mindset and skill set of how they think because they're texting or we're talking? Do you think there is that they completely listen differently because they text? Or
Absolutely.
do they think that listening to voice is even important, or is it more important to get that text and read it because you're silent when you read? You're just taking in the word and putting together in your mind what each word means to create a sentence. And I was wondering what your thoughts on that were.
I believe that they have a completely different skill set, and they need to learning the listening skill set and speaking skill set. If you're under 30, is a challenge for some people because they haven't used their words. I've been in situations where I've walked into the kitchen and Ada is doing this, and I'll say hi and she'll jump like I've said something, like I shot her or something because I used words. She'll be at the other end of the house and she'll text me, and we've discussed that. We don't do that anymore. We talk in this house. But the other thing is, now when I type, I type with one finger. I'm old. These kids, they're with two hands. If you're under 30, man, you can type War and Peace with your two thumbs in 5 minutes. It's amazing. That is a gift I wish I had, but I don't. But there definitely is a generational communication chasm between under 30 and over 30. And it doesn't mean that under 30 is bad by any means. It just means that they have learned to communicate differently. So they need to give a little and we need to give a little. We can't expect them to be, I can't expect a 20-year-old to communicate like I do as a 64-year-old. That's not fair to them. But at the same time, it's not fair to me to have you communicate to me only by text and grunts. That's not good either. So there needs to be a meeting of the minds somewhere. I just want to hit one more quick thing before we go, and that's the 3-second. Now, I won't do that. Let's wrap up the elite communicator. So elite communicators, they don't interrupt. They don't try to fix things right away. They don't rush. And that's where I was going with the 3 seconds. When someone stops speaking, if you can wait 3 seconds before you talk, it gives the impression that you're contemplating, as opposed to you weren't listening. 3 seconds, it feels long, but it really isn't. Elite communicators don't assume. If they don't know the answer, they ask a question. What elite communicators do is they ask great questions. They wait the 3 seconds. They sit in silence. They don't, and this is such a problem for me. I validate. I think I'm validating a conversation. Vicky's talking and I'm saying, yes, absolutely. Well, I just stepped on her. So my intentions are good, but that's not how an elite listener listens. They sit in silence and they take it all in. Being a good listener is extremely important. It affects your career, it affects your earning income, it affects the opportunities that you get, and it absolutely positively affects every relationship that you have, personal and professional. So that is the important thing to remember for today. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts they want to share? No? Well, it is the top of the hour. I am going to say thank you to the people who were on the replay. I am going to turn off the recording now. I'm glad you're here and I hope you enjoy the